G'day, it's Joe Pane here. I'm a facilitator of a program called Personal Power. And the purpose of this video here today is to share with you what personal power actually is. There's a model that I've created over time called the 8 Pillars to Personal Power, and I want to share with you what these 8 pillars actually are. Before I do, what actually is personal power? Well, I've got 3 definitions. The first definition is where your life conditions are actually a match to your expectations. In other words, Tony Robbins often talks about the happiness formula, which is really simple. And that is that if your expectations are not being met by your life conditions, you ain't happy. It's pure and simple. If your life conditions are a match to your expectations, you're happy. And if your life conditions exceed your expectations, then you are delirious. You're deliriously happy. It's a good thing. So to give you an example, some of the things I often hear is, I'm 40 now, and I thought that by now I'd have kids and I'd be married and I'd be living here. And this person's living in a 1-bedroom flat, single, can't hold a relationship to save themselves. This is an example of where their life conditions is not a match to their expectations. So therefore they are unhappy. Does that kind of make sense? It's pretty straightforward. Let's not complicate this. It's really, really simple. So that's my first definition of personal power, in that it's about life conditions matching expectations. Why is this important to know? This is important to know because there's only one of these 2 things that we can actually manage. The one thing that we can manage and change the definition of and the meaning of is our expectations. Who says that just because we're now 40 or 50 or 60 or 21 or 30 or whatever stage of life you're at, that life should be the way it should be? Is that those expectations have been sunken into our unconscious mind by those who have taught us to believe in these certain expectations. So I actually believe that we can actually choose our expectations over time. We can manage our expectations over time. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that we cop out on life and we lower our standards to the point where it's all, really boring. But I believe we can manage our expectations. Too many people try to manage the life conditions, and there's lots about life conditions that we can't manage. For example, if a 59-year-old woman comes to you and says, by now I would have thought that I'd be a mum. Well, you're 59, so the chances of actually giving birth are pretty much remote. So what needs to change here? The life conditions or the expectations? Clearly it's the expectations. So that's one perspective of personal power that I have. The second perspective I have of personal power is that it's simply getting over ourselves. If you're watching this video, I guess one simple message I have for you is to get over yourself. And we're always continually getting on with getting over ourselves. In other words, taking ourselves really, really lightly. I'm sure you agree that there's enough terminal seriousness going on in the world. And really, at the end of the day, having a light approach, a playful approach to life and our relationships in life makes such a big difference in positively contributing to not only our relationships in our lives, but positively contributing to our community and to our country and to our world. So playfulness, I'm sure you agree, we could do a lot more with that. And I think getting over ourselves, to me, is the slang version of personal power. The third definition of personal power, which is it all ties up in the model I want to share with you, which is the 8 pillars to personal power, is that ultimately personal power comes down to one of the main reasons why people would come and see me for coaching. So when I used to coach full time, there was only a handful of reasons why people would come and see me. They'd come and see me because they were stuck in a fork in the road, whether it be with their career, their life, or their relationship, not knowing which way to go, or not knowing what steps to take to go down the path less trodden. That was one reason why they come and see me. Another reason why they come and see me is because of lack of self-confidence, lack of self-esteem. Ultimately what this meant was a lack of self-love. And that's what I want to speak with you about here in this third definition of personal power, is that where personal power is not present, there's no self-love. And it's astounding now over the last, decade or so, it's blown my mind as to how many people, I was just having this conversation yesterday with a close friend of mine, it blows my mind how many people truly don't love themselves. And that, to me, is the core of personal power. And the reason why I want to bring up self-love is because self-love was the core that I had in my mind and in my heart when I created this model, the 8 pillars to personal power. You see, there are 8 pillars, or in other words, there are 8 different parts of life that we have relationships with, and what determines the quality of all those relationships is how much we actually love ourselves. Now, this is not about ego, this is not about pride, this is not about loving ourselves in the context of proving anything. Because at the end of the day, you'll discover in life, like we all hope to, is that truly we have nothing to defend and we have nothing to prove. And self-love is the root cause of lots of people's problems when it comes to gaining personal power. The root cause of their problems in their relationships, in their careers, in their health, in their financial management, etc. So these 8 pillars for want of a better word, you could say is the breakdown of what self-love actually is. So pillar number 1 is the relationship that we have with our self-worth. And self-worth, I think it was Wayne Dyer once defined it as the reputation that we have of ourselves with ourselves. So in other words, our opinion of ourselves. Or another way of looking at self-worth is our belief in self, that we are enough. And our relationship with self-worth goes a long way in determining how much we truly love ourselves. To continue on this point, I remember once I attended a seminar where the facilitator asked us to list our, the heroes in our life. Like he said, list your top 10 heroes in your life, personal or people that you've never met, famous people, whoever they might be. And we all started writing down people's names. And at the end of the exercise, he asked the room whether anyone had actually put their own name on top of the list. And this is an important point, because that was a key learning for me at that particular training. And that is that if we allow ourselves to truly become our own hero in our life, that goes a long way for us to embrace everything, all of what we actually are. So, pillar number 1, self-worth, goes a long way in terms of self-love. The second pillar is the relationship that we have with our emotions. And there's an illusion that people believe that emotions, or how we feel, is just how we feel. Now, let me tell you as a human behavioural expert that emotions don't come to us. They don't just appear. We don't just feel the way we feel for no reason. The truth is that we actually choose our emotions. We go to our emotions, the emotion does not come to us. We choose them. The way that actually works is that before every emotion is felt, there's a thought that we've had, a thought that we've chosen to focus on, to interpret. And that thought, we have a meaning and interpretation of what that thought actually means. And the meaning that we attribute to that thought induces a feeling. Now this happens so fast, in less than a nanosecond, that the illusion is that we feel the way we feel. We just feel this way. I've got to tell you, with every emotion that you've ever felt, there's been a thought that's preceded it. And it's because of that thought and the meaning that you've attributed to that thought that it's induced that emotion. So knowing how to manage our emotions goes a long way in terms of us gaining sustainably this sustainable connection with personal power. Now the third pillar, or the third aspect of self-love and personal power, is our relationship with our well-being, which this to me is the epitome of self-love. Because well-being at the end of the day is about us allowing ourselves to grant ourselves the greatest gift that we could possibly give ourselves. And the greatest gift that we could grant ourselves is self-respect. And that's lacking in a lot of people, from what I've noticed in life and coaching people over these years, is a lot of people don't respect themselves. And to me this goes a long way in terms of their relationship with their well-being. So if someone's relationship with their well-being is healthy, it's presupposing and really taken care of self-respect. And of course this has a major positive impact on the person's relationship with themselves and also self-love. The fourth pillar is the relationship that we have with our mind. There's nothing more beautiful than starting to learn how it is that our mind works, how it is that we actually construct our reality. And when we know how it is that we actually construct our reality and learn what that's all about, it goes a long way in us keeping that sustained connection for as long as we want with this thing called personal power. The next pillar is a pillar that draws lots of buttons, it draws lots of opinions, it draws lots of discussion. And this next pillar is the relationship that we have with money. Now all I'm going to say about money in this video is I'm going to give you one thing that I wrote about a little while ago, and it's something for you to think about. It's something that might push a button in you, it's something that might not push a button in you. Either way, so be it. So our relationship with money is a magnifier of the relationship that we have with everything else in our lives. The meaning that we put on money, the relationship that we have, so I'll say it again, the relationship that we have with money is a magnifier of the relationship that we have with everything else in our lives. So I'll give you an example and I'll move on to the next pillar. I was coaching someone once who had a scarcity mindset around money. This person was, I guess you could say, very tight with their money. And in having a coaching conversation with this wonderful young lady, she soon discovered that the problems in her relationship with her husband was because she was also tight in her emotions. She was tight in terms of what she was willing to give. Only 60 or 70% of her would show up. She wouldn't bring all of herself to the conversation. She wouldn't bring all of herself to the relationship. So what was fascinating was that even though she was tight with money, it was a clue that she was also tight with her emotions. Now, does this mean that every single person who's tight with money is tight with their emotions? No. But in this particular case, it was a clue. It was a portal. It was an indicator that her relationship with money had an impact on how it is that she actually relates to her, in this case, her husband, and her emotions toward her husband. Fascinating topic. Something that draws lots of conclusions, lots of discussion. And I'm sure some buttons are being hit as I say this. So anyway, that's one of the key pillars. And our relationship with money goes a long way in what it is that we truly think about ourselves. At the end of the day, all money is an exchange of energy. And in this physical plane of living as a man or a woman, there's nothing more that draws energy than money. Think about it. If you got home tonight and discovered that someone had taken $100,000 out of your line of credit or out of your account, how would you feel? To say you'd be a tad pissed off, we'll be putting it really lightly, I think we'd be more than annoyed. By the same token, if $100,000 had landed in our account, for no reason other than that it's landed in our account, how would you be feeling? I dare say it would magnify your feelings of whatever. I'll give you one more distinction around this one and then I'll move on. There have been many people who have won lots of money in the lottery. And as I said earlier, the relationship that we have with money is the magnifier of the relationship we have with everything else. Now, I remember meeting someone once who was not a very nice person. This person was, let's just say, not a very nice person. He became a $10 million lottery winner overnight. And let me say, what this money did was it magnified the nastiness that was already present within him. I've also noticed that there's been people who are beautiful people, compassionate, loving, giving people who have won the lottery overnight. You know, let's pretend we know someone who's won $10 million overnight who was just a beautiful, compassionate, generous person. Well, that person's key qualities of compassion and generosity will be magnified even more because he or she will be thinking, how can I use this money to help and serve even more? So that's another way of looking at this particular pillar. Something to be explored in more detail down the track, I'm sure. The next pillar is the relationship that we have. This is pillar number 5, I believe, or number 6, I think I'm up to. 6, I think I'm up to. Is the relationship that we have with self-discipline. And this relates to the pillar that I mentioned earlier, the pillar of emotion. So how it is we actually self-discipline ourselves, knowing how it is that we choose the vehicles that we choose in our lives to experience the lives the way we do. Self-discipline can be taken very literally in the sense of, self-discipline could be waking up at 5:30 in the morning to go and do your exercise or go and do your running or whatever you're doing. That's one way of looking at self-discipline. Another way of looking at self-discipline, which I believe is even more important, is us being aware that we choose our state. In other words, how it is that we feel. So the conscious choice of state is self-discipline. And there's lots more to be said about our self-discipline. But certainly, our relationship with self-discipline is an indicator of our relationship with ourselves, our self-love, or personal power. The seventh pillar to personal power that indicates how it is that we indeed love ourselves is the relationship that we have with courage. And I've got to tell you that people who actually genuinely love themselves relate to courage totally differently to people who don't love themselves. My experience has shown me that people who don't love themselves don't embrace the highest level of courage that exists. The highest level of courage that exists is our relationship with vulnerability. Vulnerability is the highest level of courage that exists. Now, we've only got a short time in this video today, so I can't go into a lot of detail, but I've got to tell you that someone who does not love themselves, who doesn't relate well to courage, equates vulnerability to weakness. Every person that I've met who has an outstanding relationship with themselves, who genuinely loves themselves completely, is someone who equates vulnerability to strength. Think about it. It takes a lot of guts to show all of you and have all of you hanging out. Because when all of you is on show, all of you can be spanked and hurt at any time. Too many people put too much in reserve in their relationships or in their life. They put 30% away as reserve just in case I get hurt, so I can pull on that 30% energy store. Now, I'm going to tell you that it takes a lot of guts to be vulnerable. With my life situation, I've been married for a number of years, 15 years at the recording of this time of this recording, and we've got a pair of 3.5-year-old twins. And I give all of myself to my family, all of it, which is as scary as all heck. Because if anything was to ever happen to my family, I don't know what would happen to me. I don't know what would be left. I know on some level I'd be okay, but that's only a concept at this stage, and I hope it's an experience that I never have. But too many people don't invest all of themselves in something that matters. So family is a classic example, where someone's only giving 60 or 70% of themselves just in case something was to happen. Now this is unconscious. People don't make these decisions consciously, although I have met some people who have. So a relationship with courage is the courage to embrace vulnerability in all of its power and beauty and glory. It takes a lot of guts to do that, because it's scary when you're investing all of you into somebody else who is your rock in your life. And my family is my rock. I wouldn't be here talking with you about this stuff if it wasn't for my family. So what does it mean if my family is taken away from me? I don't know. We'll work that out if that ever happens. So pillar number 8. Pillar number 8 is a relationship that we have about knowing ourselves. So one of the... there was a famous philosopher who once said that a life well spent, and I'm ad-libbing here big time, is that an unexamined life is a life wasted. I'm ad-libbing because that's not what he said. I don't even remember his name, and he said it a lot more eloquently than me. But I agree with the sentiment that a life unexamined is a life not lived. So in other words, I believe that one of the purposes of life, one of the journeys that we are here to have, is to get to know who we really are while we're alive, experiencing and enjoying life, and with all of its brightness and all of its darkness. And this 8th pillar, the pillar to the relationship to you knowing yourself, goes a long way in the context of self-love. So let's have a look at these 8 pillars as a brief recap. Because at the beginning of this video, what I started sharing with you was that I had 3 definitions of personal power. One was where your life conditions are a match to your expectations. The second definition was my slang definition, which is getting over yourself. So get over yourself, that's personal power. And the third is the deepest one of all, and that is our belief in self, our self-love, loving oneself completely, like really genuinely. That is personal power. And what I share with you today are the 8 pillars to personal power, which break down this thing called self-love. So that first pillar was the pillar of self-worth. The second pillar was the relationship that we have with our mind. The third pillar was the relationship that we have with our well-being. The fourth pillar was the relationship that we have with how it is that we actually relate to our emotions. The next pillar was the relationship that we have with money. The next pillar that we covered briefly was the relationship that we have with self-discipline. And the 7th pillar was the relationship that we have with courage. And of course the final and 8th pillar was the relationship that we have with knowing ourselves. I hope that this short conversation that we've had today shed some light on this thing called personal power. And if we haven't met yet, I look forward to meeting you at some stage. Personal power is an event that I'm so excited and passionate about playing. And if we ever do meet, I look forward to having a conversation with you around this fascinating topic of self-love, or in other words, personal power. Thanks very much for your time.